On today's episode of the Going Commando podcast, we are joined by our good friend Jacob, diehard Cowboys fan, to help us break down the 2023 NFL Draft live as it was happening. We began recording right around the Jahmyr Gibbs draft pick of the Lions and go on through the Commanders' pick. So without further ado, let's get this show started. Welcome to Going Commando, a Washington Commanders podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Going Commando podcast. This time coming at you live here on draft night. It's the 2023 NFL Draft. We just watched Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs go to the Detroit Lions. We are 3 to 4 picks away from the Washington Commanders draft pick. So I'm joined by, of course, a normal co-host Tom and Chris, but also special guest Jacob, a diehard Cowboys fan, a man that we have referenced many times on this podcast, finally here to break down some draft. So start off, Jacob, how we feeling?
I feel good. It's been an interesting draft. Jahmyr Gibbs is the first truly shocking one, shocking pick. Everything else I feel like has been pretty shockish, as much as it can be for this draft, where there hasn't been a clear 4 through 13 now in the draft. So I've had a fun time watching it. I'm interested to see who the commies pick, the Cowboys pick. Obviously, the Eagles got Jalen Carter, and that's terrifying for everyone in this Zoom call right now. I'm just interested to see where it goes. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, you mentioned Jalen Carter going to Philly. They get rid of Hargrave, plug and play, Jordan Davis's college teammate in Carter on the, obviously those dominant Georgia teams. That is pretty scary, man. Man, it just seems that.
Yeah, that does scare me because, I think that probably puts Philadelphia as probably the premier. I know that speaking before we really get to see Jalen Carter live, but that probably puts them at the top in terms of the division and the premier defensive line unit. I'd say, Micah Parsons still probably holds the title of like best overall defensive kind of a line player for the division, but I don't know. This probably edges out. There's already debate going on between, I'd say, who has the best complete unit in the division would be either the Commanders or the Eagles, but this, I would say gives them that edge.
Jacob, interesting. He just kind of left out Cowboys from that top 2. I feel like you might have something to say about that.
I don't necessarily disagree, but like you said, Micah Parsons is definitely the best defensive line, pass rusher, whatnot.
I'd say singular, in terms of the singular guy, but I don't know if the rest of the unit, collectively would be considered better than what Philadelphia has or
Washington. It's a very good defensive line unit for the Cowboys, but they go as far as Micah Parsons goes. And fortunately for the Cowboys, Micah Parsons is one of the very few pass rushing game breakers. And obviously he does so much more than pass rushing, but that's where he truly shines, is when he's pinning his ears back and going after the quarterback.
And it's interesting, Chris, you kind of hinted at it. I would argue that the Commanders are definitely still up there when you have a guy like Daron Payne, who had a great year. You have a guy like Jonathan Allen. Obviously, Fedarian, absolutely. And obviously, you have a guy like Fedarian Mathis, who was injured last year, and Chase Young and Montez Sweat and all these guys. And I would certainly say this is a surprising pick to me until you realize that he is Georgia teammates with the player they drafted last year. And it really makes sense. And Jacob brought this up before we were talking, but Fletcher Cox does have to retire at some point, and Jordan Davis will need someone else to play with in that defensive line. And I think it's definitely an interesting pick. I don't think it's one that we saw coming. However, this is a draft with a lot of question marks, and as we speak, the Green Bay Packers pick is in. Will soon be announced.
Yeah, I mean, I think going off of, speaking about the defensive lines in the division, Chase Young, that's another name that, especially with the recent news that just came out, we're not going to be exercising that 5th-year option, right, for Chase Young. So, I've heard speculation, could he even be traded tonight, as part of some package deal? We've seen players get traded on draft night like last year, Eagles picked up who did they pick up? Alshon, not Alshon Jeffrey. They picked up
AJ
Well, I
Brown.
mean,
AJ Brown.
AJ Brown, exactly. So like
Jeffrey.
there obviously are like players at stake here that could be potentially traded, and Chase Young's a name that I've heard floated around potentially.
That will be interesting to
breaking
see.
breaking news: Green Bay has selected Lucas Van Ness of Iowa, edge lineman. Interesting pick for sure. I think this is a spot where I had an offensive guy going to try and help out that young QB in Jordan Love, especially losing Lazard and kind of having issues this year. So another big surprise, and this is almost interesting now that we see how far a guy like Will Levis is dropping, and thinking about where the Commanders might take, who they might take rather with their 16th pick.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know that this Packers pick is that surprising that they went defensive. I mean, they've done it seemingly every year for the past 15 years. And now that Aaron Rodgers isn't there, they don't have someone to complain about it. So them going defense
Good
doesn't
point.
really surprise me as much as it probably
But
should.
I feel,
But you're
I
right,
feel
they
like
do
a
need
lot
pass
of
catchers.
I feel like a lot of people were expecting him to go with kind of like a revenge pick after the instant Rodgers leaves. It's like, oh yeah, now we'll just draft our receiver. But now they go Van Ness. I mean, I don't know much about this guy, but what I can say is that Iowa defense is always a formidable front, and I don't know, they could use an extra pass rusher. I guess maybe Preston Smith isn't cutting it anymore for him, so bring in a young gun.
Big news, breaking news. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded up for the 14th pick.
From New England.
Wow.
New England stays trading down.
But
That doesn't
what
surprise
kinda,
me.
What kind of
What they
player
do.
do we think that Pittsburgh needs? Because it's not like they are trading up to get a QB. They have their QB of the future and pick it.
Well, they certainly
Receiver?
aren't going for a tight end. They will not go
Build
for tight
that
end. They
picket
like
fence
Freiermuth.
up front. Am I right?
Yeah, there you go.
The
No,
biggest
I mean they
question
could go
becomes,
receiver because they traded Chase Claypool last season. Granted, Chase Claypool not that great, but that's
That's
still a
true.
body that they would have to replace.
That's
And-
true. I do like Pickens at their receiver spot they drafted last year, and
Yeah.
they got Johnson as well. But
He had a bad year
maybe a
though.
receiver. He did have a little bit of an off year.
and
I mean,
they acquired Allen Robinson from the Rams recently.
Okay, I
good
don't think I
point,
knew
actually. Good point.
that. I don't think I knew that.
I don't know. I think Allen Robinson is a guy that like he was good with Blake Bortles on the Jags like one time, and he was decent with the Bears,
Wait.
but it was always like
The good old days.
Does Pittsburgh trade up here to get the Steeler legend's son, Joey Porter Jr., because they believe he's going to either the Jets or Washington at the next pick? That is certainly
that's a fair point. I never thought
storyline.
about that.
that would
That's a
make a
good-
lot.
that's a good one.
That would just make way too much sense.
Penn State product. Father played for the team. Was, I believe, a multiple-time Pro Bowler for the team. Is kind of almost a 2000s legend. I mean, it has a lot of meat to it. It'll be interesting to see where they do go. I did think that maybe they go for someone to match up with TJ Watt on the defensive line, but corner is also definitely a position of need for them, considering they've been playing Joe Hayden for the past however many years.
Well, maybe the ghost of Joe Hayden. I don't know that he was there last year. They did lose Cameron Sutton, who was their starting corner. They got signed to the Lions, but I believe they brought in Pat Pete in free agency as well. But
you're right.
I mean, they cornerback could definitely be a need for him, and I don't know. I feel like the Steelers are that kind of like Mike Tomlin's that kind of guy where he would want to, bring in like a real connection, obviously with Joey Porter having been a Steelers legend.
I think this is just really interesting for the Commanders because you may see Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon, dropping to us if this is Joey Porter Jr. I still am a strong believer that we go for a tight end if it's available, mainly
Yep.
just because they're all the best guys are on the board. And as I've said multiple times on this podcast, and I'll say it again, we have the weakest tight end room in the league. Not a shot at our guys, just a plain fact in terms of experience and what they've actually put on film so far.
Yeah, I've been
But
saying
certainly
that all
interesting.
week. I've been saying that all week as well, Tom. I think that tight end is probably one of our biggest needs, if not the biggest. I mean, offensive line as well, obviously. But I mean, we will see. I think it would be rather funny if we ended up with Michael Mayer. Because Jacob, of course, for those that aren't aware, big Notre Dame guy, and would have to watch him against his team twice a year. We can only speculate, though.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Mayer is the player I've definitely watched the most in this draft. He's a supremely talented tight end, if not the most physically gifted, like Kincaid. And of course, Washington is an absolute freak. But Michael Mayer does everything you want out of a tight end. If he were to fall to the Cowboys, I'd be thrilled. I'm not overly optimistic. I think it'd be a great pick for Washington, addressing a need with a great player who can do a lot for a team.
The pick
Anyways,
is in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The pick is Broderick Jones, Georgia offensive tackle. Very interesting. Getting some protection for Pickett. I think it makes sense. But it does leaves a
Build the
question
picket
mark.
fence.
Picket fence.
yeah, that might one of the best quips out there for that picket fence call out. I think they definitely thought that, possibly the Jets or us could be wanting to take an offensive lineman, which would make a lot of sense. So I guess that's why they thought they needed to jump up here.
Yeah, a lot
So
of tackles being taken, I feel like, so far, and which honestly leads me to feel like I still think we might trade back just because I feel like that was a big need for us. And maybe if we feel like a lot of our quality that we were looking at for the tackle position's gone at that point, then, maybe we'll just try and get some value out of a trade back. I'm not sure. I guess it's too early to tell.
do we think that the Jets go wide receiver now with Jackson Smith and Jigba still on the board and Aaron Rodgers complaining about not getting a wide receiver in the draft for the past 10 years?
Hard question. Garrett Wilson is certainly a big name on that team, but you also have to remember they added Alan Lazard, so they would be going for their wide receiver 3 if they did draft someone. I think it's probably more likely that you do see a cornerback at that role to match alongside Sauce Gardner.
That would make sense.
Safety is also a major position of need for them. Maybe they look somewhere deeper in their secondary. I do believe this is a defensive pick, though. If it was offensive, I'd be quite surprised.
I think they maybe wanted to go with an offensive lineman and now maybe have to reconsider because you just got Rodgers. You got to protect the guy. I think their defense is pretty solid across the board. They've got some good pieces in the secondary and on the defensive line in New York. So,
well, offensive line, that's an interesting point that you make because they did have the Louisville outside tackle. Oh gosh, what's his name? Mekhi Becton, thank you, who had injury issues the past few years. So I don't know if that makes him more of a question mark. Certainly wide receiver is a spot, Jacob, which you are right. Tight end, they just signed Robert Tonyan, as I explained, a guy that is definitely a big is beloved by Aaron Rodgers in that organization. I just think you see defense here. You have Christian Gonzalez on the board. You have Joey Porter Jr. I feel like that makes the most sense here. However, this is one of the least sensical drafts I've ever seen in my lifetime. So
Really has
Not a
been.
Jahmyr Gibbs guy.
That one, man. Like,
I mean, that's a guy who makes plays. He's a playmaker. I don't understand it personally.
Why'd they sign David Montgomery to a 3-year deal if this was the plan?
I forgot they signed him to a 3-year contract.
They signed him to a 3-year contract. They still have Swift. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, that doesn't. I mean, he can line up in the slot. He can catch passes, and he's just an all around playmaker. Where those guys are more traditional running backs. I still, once again, don't think it makes that much sense to me, but they can make it work. I feel.
Looking at the top available guys, Nolan Smith is the fourth highest rated. Jordan Addison, a guy from the Maryland area who had one of the better seasons of his entire lifetime with Kenny Pickett in college. Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously. This pick could go any single way, honestly. And I think you're right about getting back on the Jahmyr Gibbs point. I think maybe you look at one of those guys being a trade asset, but it's a running back. The running back position is so low value in this league currently. It kind of makes you wonder what the thought is there. And I certainly don't think you sign and trade a guy in the NFL, especially to a 3-year contract, despite the leverage that kind of gives you when it comes to trading. But weird draft so far, man. Very weird.
Could they move Swift? He obviously wasn't great last year.
I think I feel like he's getting towards the end of his rookie deal right now, possibly. And so
that makes sense.
Like maybe they just don't want to have to pay him, but again, why they must have really liked Gibbs to spend that kind of draft capital on him, considering the situation they're in already. I do think they have another first round pick later. I think.
I believe so. I'll look it up. I believe they have pick 18.
That would sound about right, because they had that last pick they had was from the Rams for the trade for Stafford.
They're pick 18. So they'll be after New England, who picks after Washington, who are almost on the clock. So
it is interesting here. It is interesting here to see Will Levis drop down to 16. Do you think that the Commanders even undertaking him at this point? I mean, obviously Howell's the guy as of right now, but you have a guy like Will Levis who, consensus first round guy. He definitely has some talent. So do you think you even look at him with the 16th pick here? Is it too much of a stretch to think that they look at that sort of?
I think if this was a Snyder-led front right now, I feel like there'd be a higher chance of that happening. But I don't know. I feel like in general, this regime has not been one to take these kind of big swings. So I don't know that they go for QB here.
I mean, if they have a quarterback that they really like, which obviously you'd take Levis ahead of Hooker. But if they're big Levis guys, I would do it if I were them. I'm not a huge Levis guy personally, from the obviously admittedly not much that I've seen from him, but I'm not sold on how he obviously had a really great start to his college year or his college career, had a terrible final year in college, and then obviously we were all at the Cowboys Commies game where he led them to a victory, and as much as it was a huge win for the Commies, I didn't come away terribly impressed with him. That was one of those games where the Cowboys were going to inevitably shoot themselves in the foot, and they did it as many times as they possibly could before the clip was empty. So if you're high on the quarterback, I would take the quarterback, but I don't think that's what they do here. The Jets pick is in now, which is interesting.
It is interesting. Yep. The Jets ran all the way down to about 49 seconds on the clock before getting their pick in. Almost makes you wonder if they were looking to trade back here. Maybe they don't like the guy that they were kind of looking at, thought he could get him a bit later. No one bites on the 15th overall pick, though. So I'm curious to see who they do select here. And this could easily affect who the Commanders take with the next pick.
Yeah, I'm sure it could affect that. I mean, now that we're, I guess, on the clock, basically now, what does everyone want to give their take on what we think we're doing here? I guess we don't have the exact pick in for the Jets yet, like you mentioned, Tom, but I still think there's a good chance we trade down. I guess I'll give that as my prediction here.
I personally like the idea of trading down. I think it depends on what you're trading down for. If you're going to draft a tight end here, I think you just take whoever you like the most here. Don't trade
I'm
down.
not
Just
against
take
that.
him.
I'm not against the tight end move. It would
We're
be
Exactly.
showing
great. I just
Jackson
don't think
Smith and
I don't think
Jigba.
they're going to do that, but we'll see.
I mean, take him here. It makes sense. Jackson Smith, a Jigba. Definitely an interesting guy. Be our second Ohio State wide receiver on the offensive side of the ball would make sense with Terry. Maybe give Sam Howell another weapon. You lose Cam Sims, so your receiver room is hurting pretty
True.
bad right now.
True.
Oh,
That is
Um,
true. But like,
If you
think
wanna
like
go-
Mayhew. Think like Mayhew here. Like, what are you going to do if you're Mayhew and Rivera?
They
shoot
want
myself in the foot and go defensive.
corner. Yeah, they want to go. They want to get Joey Porter, Gonzalez.
if you want to get Howell weapons and give him as fair of a shake as you possibly can this year, I
He's
think
got weapons though.
I think tight end would be
Tight
the
end.
spot to go though.
True.
Because like you wouldn't go another receiver assuming that the
No,
Jets
tight
don't
end's the
take Jackson
glaring
Smith and
offensive
Jigba.
need in
Yeah.
terms of weapons.
We have our first Make-A-Wish kid reading out a selection on this pick. Very energetic. I like the green tie. Seems like he really is into this entire thing. I'm curious to see who this pick is.
The Big Brothers Big Sisters kid was really cute. He was so
that
nervous.
kid was so
He was.
nervous. That guy was like he took an eternity to even like say a first word. I honestly I thought they were gonna have to pull him out of there. Like
Yeah, I thought that was super endearing in all honesty. So
shout out to
it was
him
funny.
for getting off the pick. I thought he was just gonna freeze.
Imagine pulling a kid from making a draft selection. That would be the most heartless move imaginable.
And Goodell would have had to do it.
Oof.
Goodell might have honestly done it. Honestly, at this point, the Jets selection is in, currently being
All right.
read.
Read it coming up to the stage.
Will McDonald, the fourth out of Iowa State edge rusher. Wow.
I can't say I
do
know
not
too much
think that
about it.
impacts us.
Yeah, that's definitely not.
It does
That
not
does-
impact the Commanders. I don't think.
Doesn't really impact
not
us.
say.
I also don't think that that's a guy that was really getting talked about too much either.
He really wasn't. And I got to say, this is an interesting pick considering they got Jermaine Johnson last year in the first round on the edge. Maybe they tried to look to shore up the other edge. Interesting pick, really. I thought they go defensive. I didn't think they go with an edge guy. This is a prime position for the Commanders to take a cornerback, though. However, and they get honestly their run of the litter, considering Devon Witherspoon was probably thought to be gone by this point anyway. So it'll be curious to see where they go here. That certainly doesn't clear up any options for us, though.
Yeah, it doesn't make it the pick any more clear for the commies from a projecting standpoint for us.
In the video they are showing for Will McDonald IV, they show him running, doing a backflip off the wall, jumping over a Pontiac car, which was like a 1996 Pontiac, not even like a good one, jumping over a Toyota RAV4.
Hey, man.
All the highlights of this guy are just jumping over cars.
That's product placement at its finest right there. I mean, if that doesn't make you want to drive a Toyota RAV4, I don't know what would.
It's gonna be, that's gonna be used in some advertisement. Well, we're on the clock, boys. I think
Pick is
trading
in.
down makes sense.
Pick is in.
Pick is
Pick
in.
is
All right,
in.
I guess we
in.
are taking
Ooh.
someone here.
Pick is in, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm
I
excited.
am
to see who it is.
sweating. I'm sweating.
Oh
It's
gosh.
weird. I gotta
Only
admit,
The
it's
dread
weird
that's coming from you guys is so foreign to me because the Cowboys have made good draft picks in the first round basically every year for the past 15 years.
Well,
I
This
feel like
I'm
we
just,
either
like, pretty
swing big
comfortable
or
with
we
whoever.
miss hard.
Yeah.
I thought that I did kind of agree with you, Chris. I thought this was going to be a trade back spot, but the pick is in. My final last prediction, I'm going to say Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State cornerback. That's my official prediction for this pick.
I'll say
I'm-
Kincaid.
I'm gonna go with Jacob and say Kincaid as well.
We'll see. I mean, I said we were going to trade back. I think it'll be. I think
Pick is
they'll
in
address
though,
corner.
so
I think they'll, I guess, address corner at this point based on all the tackles that have already been off the board, which I think was they were going to be between those two.
Do you like Porter or Gonzalez here more?
Um,
It's a
I don't know.
win-win
We had luck
situation
with
either
Penn
way.
State last year. A guy out of Penn State who we think is pretty good. So I don't know.
Good point.
Oh, man, if they're going to a damn commercial
Josh
before our pick.
Harris,
Of course they are.
please, Josh Harris. Please, Josh Harris, don't fuck us. Please don't fuck. This is
this is a new pick.
Dude, isn't it not even officially him yet?
It's not
I mean, they
officially
probably haven't
him,
signed the papers.
but I don't think
they've been
Snyder.
They've been saying like Steve Apostolopoulos is still in the running, or that guy's been claiming that he's still in the running. So I don't know.
I am going to be opening my second beer of the night, and if this is Dalton Kincaid, I am going to chug it. However, I don't think it's Dalton Kincaid.
Well, this is Dalton Kincaid. Goodbye, Logan Thomas.
Honestly, and listen, goodbye and good riddance. You have done very little for us in the past few years.
Is Logan Thomas the longest tenured player on the roster?
No.
Now that Cam Sims is gone, it's Tressway.
Tressway, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess that makes sense.
But outside of special teams, I mean, now with Cam Sims gone,
outside of special teams, Kendall Fuller,
like Chase Rouillet.
Well, Kendall Fuller was gone for
true.
For like 2 years. Chase Rouillet is probably it. Yeah.
Is there anyone?
Tressway is your JP Lapacador, however you pronounce the Cowboys' old long snapper's name.
Yeah.
Special teams dude who's been there he's basically the wallpaper.
We had Nick Sundberg for God knows how long.
Morgan Moses. I can just go down the laundry list of like long-term play. God,
it's still weird to me that
kind of
Dak
cleaned house of all the long-term tenured guys at that point when he came in. Besides like Cam Sims and Tressway and
John Allen, honestly, might be as well.
He's up there.
Oh yeah, I guess he's been there for quite a while.
The thing that also
he was the year
interesting to
after
note here,
Rouillet,
the cornerback. The note for cornerback here is also that we pick up Cameron Dantzler in free agency. I believe we pick up one more guy as well. We drafted Christian Holmes last year. We had another rookie as well, who I cannot remember the name of at this point in time. Do you really go corner here after all these guys?
Rashad Wildgoose.
You have Rashad Wildgoose. Thank you. That's what I'm thinking. Rashad Wildgoose. You have Benjamin St-Juste. You have Kendall Fuller playing a lot of snaps. You lose Bobby McCain in the secondary. Corner makes sense. Don't get me wrong, because we will have our pick of what is arguably the second best corner. I hope it's offense. I think we need a tight end. I think Kincaid's the guy. I think if you don't go Kincaid, Darnell Washington's upside is unbelievably high. I know Michael Mayer is a guy that we've talked about for this. I don't think Mayer goes this early. If he does, then it's interesting. Goodell is walking up to the podium now. We await with bated breath. And we shit the bed. Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State.
Dude.
What's up with Gonzalez? What happened?
Playmaker, skinny frame, Samari roll is what I see.
Okay, I'm way behind you guys.
166.
I'm way behind you guys, so I can't see. But I did not know that name. I'm not familiar with that name.
That is not one of the guys.
Instincts.
Quote unquote, not one of the guys they've been saying was going to be one of those top picks. I mean, but at the same time, think about where we were last year when they picked Jahan Dotson. Were any of you guys expecting that pick?
Not necessarily. However,
no.
I feel like it wasn't as big of a surprise.
I felt we didn't have a wide receiver need. Really.
I mean, you have what people consider the 2 and 3 in terms of corners available on the board, and you go with a guy out of Mississippi State.
That's where Montez Sweat, though.
Montez Sweat, Preston Smith. I mean, we have a good history with them. However, I don't understand the pick. I really don't. And the Patriots pick is in already.
I think that
the Patriots are laughing at you guys right now. I accidentally had the pick tip.
I think that this staff is very set in their ways. When they have a guy they like, they're just going to go ahead and take him. I think that's what we saw
Right.
with Dotson
That's exactly
last
right.
year. Like they don't care about the mock drafts or whatever. If they think that this guy's valued as high on their draft board as they think, they're just going to go ahead and take him. That's what we see here with Manuel.
So
Yeah,
let's
they
get
feel
some
that
background on this
is-
guy. Does anyone, let's,
I will be
I'm
pulling
still
up the
behind on this thing.
Wikipedia page. This pick is the most shit the bed pick I think we could have possibly had. I honestly, I can't think of a worse pick at the time of draft than this pick right now. Christian Gonzalez goes next. I
Yeah.
freaking
He was much more hyped up. I had heard his name tossed around.
He was mocked in some mocks as the third pick. So the fact that
Lightest DB in the combine in the past how many years? What did they say? Oh, dude, he's 166.
166.
Are you fucking kidding me? This guy weighs less than me.
Oh my god,
He's
166.
done,
That's like what's his guy's height? 6 foot, 6'1".
6
They
foot.
just
like
drafted
pushing.
me.
I
They
thought he
just
was
drafted
6'3".
me.
This kid, Forbes, born in Granada, Mississippi on January 13, 2001, attended Granada High School where he had 49 tackles and 8 interceptions. Committed to play for Mississippi State. At Mississippi State, he played as a true freshman and made 9 starts in 11 games. Finished the year with 5 interceptions that year, played sophomore year. He set the NCAA Division I Football Bowl subdivision FBS career record for most interceptions returned for a touchdown with 6.
I mean,
Okay,
that's a hell
that's
of a
promising.
CV.
That's a promising stat.
It's very weird considering that Christian Gonzalez fell to obviously the pick after.
Maybe they know something we don't.
And Porter.
I mean, they get paid to do it. I hope they know something I don't.
And interesting measurables on this guy: 6 foot 3 1/4 inches, 166 pounds, 40-yard dash of 4.35. So he does have some burners.
So he's a burner.
Vertical jump of 38 inches, so he can definitely get up there, and a broad jump of almost 12 or almost 11 feet. Certainly athletically gifted, a little small, especially considering some of the receivers he'll be going up against in the NFC East.
However, him versus CD. That's
not
the
the
matchup
worst.
we want to see.
So
6
what are
picks
we?
though last year. That's pretty good. We need more of that.
Yeah, what are we saying now?
You make plays, man.
In the secondary, you've got Fuller. I guess you
Fuller.
have Forbes. Are you playing
Fuller, Forbes, and St. Juice seems to be the guys that
St.
they're
Juice
like.
at the slot area?
Dude, I honestly think I don't know if Forbes if he can play inside, but I think
he can't play outside.
They like
St. Juice.
Outside. They like St. Juice on the outside.
They did this year.
They're going to keep St. Juice on the outside if I had to guess, and to put this guy inside.
Forbes can't play outside. He doesn't have the physicality to play for it. So maybe put him in a slot and keep St. Juice out there. And I mean, that was something that we've been thinking about for quite a while. It's just crazy to think that Christian Gonzalez slips through our fingers. This is possibly one that we look at and think, wow, this was obviously a horrible pick. I will say this is probably the most surprising pick since Josh Doxson, and we know how well that went for us.
All right, let's not go that far right away.
Doxson seems pretty good.
Josh Doxson.
No, he's talking about Josh
you're right. That was a disaster. Sorry, my bad.
That is a cursed name to bring up amongst fans.
Let's not compare this guy to Doxson just yet. I mean, look, like you said, Clark, I think you're right. I think this staff, they identify the guys they like. They don't play into kind of gaming the system and trying to, see, what they can get. They identify a guy they like, and if he's there at the spot they wanted to take him at, and when they wrote it up, they're taking him. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I mean, the guy's clearly talented, looking at his numbers from last year. I mean, he's a little undersized, so that is interesting to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I think, we needed a guy to shore up that secondary. And like you said, we got St. Juice and Fuller also at the spot. And then, on the back end, we'll have Cam Curl, of course, and then Derek Forrest, who had a very solid year for us last year too. So I think, it makes sense from a positional standpoint. Again, a little surprising on the actual player, I guess, but we'll just have to see.
Do you guys want to talk about the early picks in this draft? I feel like we're kind of burying the lead since we hopped on around pick number 10. There's a lot of potentially league changing picks going on, especially in Houston.
We can certainly discuss that. Top 3 picks so far. Bryce Young going to the Panthers at number 1. I think we all somewhat expected that. It was a bit of a question leading into this draft for sure. And certainly loomed large over this draft as who would be the first overall pick. To see him go, I don't think any of us are surprised. Jacob, you said you had some thoughts on this. I'm curious to hear what you got.
Yes. If he was like 3 inches taller, there would have never been a doubt who the number 1 pick was. He's been the number 1 pick in my mind since he led that fourth quarter drive against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. He has everything you want in a quarterback in regards to mentality and personality and field vision. He has it all. He's obviously a very small guy, which people are going to worry about. For me, I just take the chance. I'm not a huge Stroud guy, not a huge Levis guy, not a huge Richardson guy, though I think Richardson has all the pure talent, raw talent to get to being a franchise quarterback. But I just think that Bryce Young is the guy. Like, I love that guy. He seems like a really, really good dude. He's an incredible quarterback. He just happens to be short.
You make a good point there, and I think Bryce Young is certainly a guy that I absolutely agree. You see him going first, no doubt about it, if he's about 3 inches taller. I think second is an interesting pick, though, too, along with third, while we're on the subject. CJ Stroud going there, Will Anderson as well. I think this was the consensus top 3 for most people's drafts. I think maybe you see Will Anderson going a little bit lower or higher, depending on what mock draft you look at. So not necessarily surprised, but certainly seeing the Texans get Stroud and Will Anderson and seeing the Panthers get Bryce Young. I mean, those are some league-defining players there. Let's just open up the conversation on those 3. I mean, I think that's the correct order that you get them in. You get Bryce Young 1, you get CJ Stroud 2, you get Will Anderson 3. And the Texans come out of this looking like they made the right picks. Now, will that be true in the future? Time will tell. But just general takes on that top 3.
It's those right 3 guys, I think. I personally would have taken Will Anderson above Stroud, but if you're a quarterback needy team like the Texans have been for the past few years with the whole Deshaun Watson situation, then you draft a quarterback. And I think Stroud has all the capabilities of being a really good quarterback. But I know he'll be remembered in Columbus for being the guy who didn't win a Big Ten championship, that didn't beat Michigan. But then he finally put it all together and was absolutely incredible. It was a jaw-dropping performance against Georgia. And if that's the last thing you see from him, you should be excited if you're drafting him. And I totally get why that the Texans drafted him.
Yeah, I wasn't so sure about Stroud. Really the draft started with Houston because everybody knew what that number 1 pick was going to be. Nobody could have seen that trade coming to get Will Anderson. So I guess the question of what they were doing, they were trying to keep that under wraps, saying, hey, we want to get both of these 2 guys, because all the mocks were saying they're either taking Stroud or they're taking Anderson. That really set the precedent for the draft. And then with Richardson going at 4, you still got to have to ask yourself where Levis is going to fall. That being said, Detroit is announcing their pick right now.
Detroit made their pick for me. Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa. Interesting pick. I think defense is certainly an area of need for them. Get a guy that you can pair with Aiden Hutchinson on the outside. This looks more of like a ball-hawking linebacker, almost like a Leighton Vander Esch of sorts. Sean Lee prototype. No comment shall be made in that sense. However, I will say he looks pretty good in coverage. maybe that's the thread that I'm following a bit more is his coverage skills rather than
Six
He's
other
got
six
the widest
four,
name
characteristics.
possible.
6'4", 240 or 250 rather linebacker. That's some pretty good size. And I talked about this earlier after that Packers pick. Most of the time when you're drafting an Iowa defensive player, I would trust that they're
Pretty
always
solid.
known to
Yeah.
be a pretty solid defensive front.
250. That's almost 100 pounds more than our pick.
Oh, man, do we even have to go there right now?
I recently asked my mother whether or not we have a good cardiologist on staff because I swear to God these Commanders are going to give me a heart attack, and it's not funny. However,
no.
I do think this the interesting story of this draft so far is how far Will Levis will slide. Tampa Bay's pick is in, and I certainly believe
That's
that
got to be
they need
Levis,
a
right?
quarterback. It makes
That would make
sense.
sense. Why
Seattle
they
makes
put it in so
sense.
quickly.
Seattle makes sense. Tampa Bay makes sense. Minnesota coming up will make sense as as a developmental guy. But I mean, outside of that, every team on this list is not quarterback hungry by any sense of the means, besides maybe New Orleans at 30, and that's even a stretch. So this will be interesting, man. Levis might fall into the second round, and if you take Levis in the second round, I think you get a steal, honestly.
Yeah, you got to be pretty happy with that.
I
Yeah,
mean
and
Seattle.
I think anytime you draft a defensive player from Iowa, you know he's got to be pretty good because they only score 9 points a game. Like, how else are they supposed to win? They got to win with defense. So, I mean, I'd feel pretty good about drafting a Iowa
Quick
defensive player this year.
quick
I mean, they
note,
literally averaged 12 points.
Quick note, Will Levis was just shown on the NFL Network. The pick is in for Tampa Bay, and he is
Yeah,
not on the phone. So this is an interesting turn of events. Maybe you wait a little bit, give it a little bit of time, wait for the pick to be announced to call him and give him his talk. Also, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, how can we forget signing Baker Mayfield to a 1 year, $8.5 million contract this offseason? Do
dude,
they
I
give
didn't know that
him
happened.
run?
How can we
He
possibly
did.
forget that?
I mean, you could draft him and start him, and if you or draft Levis and start Baker, and I'd feel better about that than drafting Levis and starting him week one. I mean, I still think Baker has the potential to be a serviceable quarterback in the NFL. It's obviously been up and down with him his entire career, but I think he has
I mean,
something to give to a
you've
team
got
as a starter.
you've got a decent, contingent of skill players still there. You still have
Yeah,
Evans and Godwin,
those
so
are receivers who will make it pretty easy on you, especially Evans. I mean, throw it up to that guy and he'll bring it down.
Buccaneers make their selection. Defensive tackle Kalijah Cansey out of Pittsburgh. One of the highest drafted Pittsburgh guys on the defensive side of the ball since Aaron Donald. Interesting
there's
pick
going to
there.
be
Defensive
comparisons
tackle.
there to Aaron Donald because he's kind of an undersized D lineman. I think that hopefully that's not blinding scouts, but I mean, hey, yeah, and they're literally just as I say that the graphic comes up comparing him and Aaron Donald.
No one should ever be compared to Aaron Donald. That
On my end,
best defensive tackle I've ever seen in my life. Best defensive
on
player
my
maybe I've ever
end,
seen.
ooh, good, nice little explosive hand. Yeah, explosive. The comparison on my end to the NFL Network is Ed Oliver, which I haven't heard about Oliver since he's gone to Buffalo. Now, maybe that's just me, but I mean, interesting guy to select here, especially with a pick where you could have seen Will Levis go, and at this point, maybe you see Levis go to Seattle, and this is just draft day, Will Levis is Bo Callahan,
I've still never
and
seen that movie. I meant to watch it this week.
it's a great movie.
I think it's
For
free
our,
on HBO. Maybe on
it
Monday
should
night.
be, and for our
Actually, draft is going
listeners,
to go until like 1 on the main.
if you have a chance, do watch the movie Draft Day. It is quite fun, and it's a good movie, and it kind of gives you some insight onto what these days are like.
They
R.I.P.
just
Chadwick.
did the comparison between Cansey and Donald, and
He's the
their
same size.
measurables
Yeah, I saw
are
that.
the exact same in
A
everything.
few inches shorter on the arms, but basically same size bar 5 pounds. Sam Howell gets a highlight in great handoff from Sam Howell.
I'll tell you what, I think this draft has been extremely interesting despite all the issues with it. At least the issues that I have with it, let me rephrase.
The issues with the commie specific pick and Jahmyr Gibbs. Those are your 2 issues. I still can't believe they took Jahmyr Gibbs. That's pretty weird.
I will say, I have issues with Darnell Wright being one of the first tackles taken off the board with the Bears.
That was
I think he's part of this hype. I think it's interesting because I do believe you see Hendon Hooker continue to drop, considering he hasn't been taken yet. And
Hendon Hooker's not dropping though, right? Like he was projected to be like maybe late first, early second, and here we are starting to get towards the end of the first round. I still think he has a chance to go tonight, but with Levis dropping, it seems more and more unlikely.
Yeah, I just not sure I understood. Obviously he was very talented, but the serious injury concerns are there. Plus, the dude is 25 already, and is certainly not getting any younger there. So, he seemed like things were going well for him at Tennessee this year, of course, until that injury. But I don't know. The age is definitely a concern for me.
Well, if age is a concern with Hendon Hooker, what is it for Stetson Bennett? This man is in his 30s nearly.
Stetson Bennett is going to be a mid-round pick, and I actually am quite high on Stetson Bennett. That's my hot take. I don't think he's going to be a franchise quarterback or anything, but I think he has the potential to be a
next Cooper
sufficient.
Rush.
He could be like a sufficient starting quarterback potentially if everything goes right. I think he'd be way more I think you'd love to have him as a backup. I think he could be like Mike White level, or like you said, Cooper Rush, where they can
elite.
come in, they can not elite, but they can help you out. They can help you win games. They won't kill you, but they won't necessarily win you any games either. And that's what you want a backup quarterback. You see the storm that Dallas got through the first 5 weeks of the season with Cooper Rush, where, he wasn't spectacular, but he made enough plays and some pretty big moments for them and really did save their season from being dead in the water at week 2.
Well, speaking of Dallas, Jacob, you see a lot of interesting names still on the board with Dallas only 6 picks away after the Seattle Seahawks make their pick. I'm curious, what do you think right now for these Dallas Cowboys? Do you think that they're going to be getting a guy that they truly want and are going to be hitting on? Or do you think that they look at this and say, you know what, I'm going to trade down, maybe get a guy that I like a little bit later, especially with the names that are coming off the board? What do you see Dallas doing here? It's certainly an interesting position to be in, especially with the Giants picking just ahead of you. One pick before, to be specific.
But yeah, I didn't think about that. That's definitely interesting. They haven't been a trade down team for the past few years. They did trade down and got Micah Parsons. That was only 2 picks, and that was early in the draft.
I believe they traded down for Taco Charlton as well.
Don't say his name in my presence.
You can't say Taco Charlton, and you can't say Josh Doxson. We'll just make that agreement.
If you say his name, if you say Taco Charlton's name one more time, he's going to show up like Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I honestly don't really know what the Cowboys are going to do here. I've kind of given up in the past few years trying to predict what they're going to do. I definitely gave up after last year.
What's Jerry want?
They took Tyler Smith.
Actually, this is a great question. What does Jerry want? And does the lack of success with Dak Prescott make you consider Levis if he's there?
No,
they're not. Throw that in.
You're obviously messing with me there, but no, I think that Jerry has been pretty hands off for the past few years. Chris Pratt has appeared on my screen. I think that with the top 2 tight ends still on the board, it's becoming increasingly likely that they'll take one of Kincaid or Michael Mayer. I think either would be a good pick. It's the one spot of desperate need. As much as I enjoy Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot, they're not the type of guy who is going to be a huge playmaker for you, and that's something they need. Dalton Schultz just wasn't enough last year either.
Good thing they
I kind
franchise
of
tagged him.
that was the worst decision they've made in years. No, I kind of hope it's Michael Mayer because of Notre Dame's history of developing good Dallas Cowboys. The two best picks, or like the two picks that made me happiest, were when they took Zach Martin over Johnny Manziel. I ran around my house screaming. I was so happy. And then I wanted them to take Jalen Smith at 4 the year that he got drafted. So I wanted him over Zeke, but then he of course tore his ACL and a bunch of other parts in his knee in his bowl game, the Fiesta Bowl, where Joey Bosa also got ejected for targeting, interestingly enough. So that I don't know, maybe it's just like good juju and I kind of believe in that. But if people who have watched more Dalton Kincaid than I have think he's the best tight end, then I'd be way more than happy with him. I could also see the Cowboys going cornerback and then having your 3 corners being Trayvon, Stephon Gilmore, and let's say Joey Porter Jr. That has the potential to be a truly great core. And then you'd also have Nashawn Wright, which he might be a guy who they're really high on right now, and they could not make a pick at cornerback because they think he can be your 3 or 2 next year. And I think he has potential for that.
Here's an interesting thought for you, Jacob. Nolan Smith still on the board. Do you think you get someone to pair with Micah Parsons? Maybe take some of the pressure off him, possibly have a guy that gets, a lot of tackles in play because Micah Parsons is getting that kind of attention. I mean, Nolan Smith was a guy who was, number one overall recruit in his senior year, which was ironically my senior year. A guy that certainly has shown a lot of flash on the field was SEC Freshman of the Year when he joined Georgia. Do you like that idea? Maybe getting a defensive guy like that?
That's a super talented player, and I think they're in a fortunate position where they don't have a lot of spots of like real true need outside of tight end. And if you don't want to take a tight end in the first round and you go with a guy like Nolan Smith, I'd be more than happy with that. He's a super talented player that allows you to do a little bit more with Micah in regards to playing him in coverage, having him be a more true linebacker at times, which he's so ridiculously talented. He can do that. And then you'd have Nolan Smith and DeMarcus Lawrence coming off the edge. And that has the potential to be special on its own, regardless of Micah Parsons. And when you throw Micah Parsons into that equation, that puts them in contention for the best defensive line unit in the NFC East. I think if Nolan Smith is everything that he can be, that would make the defensive line situation in the NFC East truly terrifying. And Seattle just took Jackson Smith and Jigba, which that's super interesting. I think that guy is a stud. He's such a good route runner. He's in the spirit of many Ohio State wide receivers for the past 5 years. And there will be another one next year in Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, that's just a factory at this point.
Absolutely interesting pick. Absolutely an interesting pick. Geno Smith being their quarterback out there. They get a guy to pair along with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, 2 of the better receivers in the NFC West, if you ask me. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is certainly a guy that you're going to see a lot of in the future. If not on this team, then If not on this team, then with another team. I have been drinking some beers because of the Commanders pick. I'm going to open number 3 soon.
This kind of made me want to drink.
Drinking?
Yeah, let's just put our left hands up.
Cowboys don't do that to me anymore.
Left hands up. We're in this thing together, man. We are in this thing together.
I physically put that left hand up. I hope you two did too.
I did not, but I'm with you guys spiritually as a suffering sports fan. I know how it feels.
A suffering sympathizer.
that'll do it on this week's episode of the Going Commando podcast. We hope you all enjoyed our draft special. For my co-hosts Tom, Chris, and special guest Jacob, thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time, and as always, HTTC and HTTR.